Hey folks, we are diving into a conversation about Spirit Warriors that was inspired by Dungeon Dad's Monster of the Week episode last week about Spirit Warriors. I'm going to get into this with you guys here in a minute. I just want to first check my signal and get my shout outs out, and then we're going to dive into this for a little while. So just give me a hot moment here to make sure I sound good. Just give me a hot moment here to make sure I sound good. All looking pretty good. Okay, cool. I can mute that out. If you guys know me on Twitter, I am attempting to post on. Well, I haven't posted on Twitter, and I don't want to slow my stream down. I'll post after the fact on Twitter. But just give me a hot second here for me to hit my Discord's shout outs here real fast, just to get things going, and we'll be done here in a hot second, and then we'll dive into this conversation. So if you don't know who I am, my name's Phil Kearney. I create 5e supplement PDFs that I publish on the DMsGuild, at least for now, and you can actually check a link down below in the description. There is a link to a slew of different books that I've previously published on DMsGuild. You can look at any of them. They're 100% preview. Read them cover to cover. If you ever find yourself going back to look at an idea again, that's probably a good indication that it's worth buying. So check out all the artwork. There's like over 100 unique illustrations that I crafted over the course of the creation of that book. And hold on, let's go down to it. And there. Okay, cool. So I've got all my Discords bumped, and this is so yeah, I create PDFs. You can check them all out. This is the next one that's going to be publishing on the DMsGuild, probably in the next month or so. Spelljammer Combat and Exploration. There's no secret that Spelljammer was a little thin on rules. So we went through the effort here since August to flesh out all the mechanics that curve into the ideas that 5e had kind of born from 2e into 5e to kind of update the mechanics with the inspiration that WotC was trying to go with to make it fast and fun. So this is the cover that we made. I think it's like around episode 13 through 17 that we created this in the Spelljammer stream that I have on this channel. So I stream content every morning, and often twice a day, like on Mondays and Wednesdays. So like and subscribe to check out what I got going on. This, the Eberron adventure that I'm crafting, the martial powers mana system for martial characters to expand instant and enchantment effects for them to become more versatile and have more flexibility like spellcasters have. But we're going to there you go. That works if you like. And so this is the Monster of the Week. I won't necessarily play it, but it's in the description. If you check the description down here, here's a link to this here, and he is talking about a couple different things. He's talking about flip around here. This is obviously not an edited video. I just kind of talk off the cuff, so hopefully this is going to be a tolerable conversation to anybody that's checking this out for the first time. But he was talking, if you flip through here, there is a number of things that he was looking at here. Sorry, Jay, for being so awkward. Big robots. It's the, well, I'm having a hard time finding it specifically, but there was three types. So if you check it out yourself, there it was. There was the three creatures that he was looking at offhand. First off, he was looking at the Constellate. Not officially, just as an example of some of the weirdness that's inside Spelljammer. Constellate, I saw he had eyes on the Great Dreamer. And then he centered the conversation around Spirit War. I really encourage you to check out Monster Week. Subscribe to Dungeon Dad. He has fantastic content. I've never felt compelled to comment on any of it, except that I just happen to be building this combat and exploration system for Spelljammer that the Spirit Warrior just folds into so nicely. So I am going to take a look here with you guys. Here is the post-edit document that we have for Spelljammer that's going through a little bit of touch-up, but we're going to be doing this. This is going to be this 115 page document is going to be dropping into layouts probably next week or so for us to start doing page layouts, creating space for tables, and in illustrations that we'll be painting here online. You can check all my past content to see the kind of illustrating that I do, and I hope that it inspires you to tag along and shout out at me when I get caught on get snagged on a problem, or to cheer me on when I'm actually figuring things out. But here's all the different stuff that we're talking about in the book. But today we're talking about spirit warriors, right? So I'm just going to look at the content here. Spirit warriors are, and as Dungeon Dad explains it so much more succinctly as I can, they're basically giant undead creatures that you climb inside of and control like a Gundam or an Eva unit from Evangelion, or like Escaflones from Escaflowne, or any big mecha power fantasies that you may have in your RPG games, whether they're Rifts, Shadowrun, even, or now Spelljammer as well. These are things that a Spirit Warrior is. This is the old 2nd edition version of it that we found online. I don't have any affiliation with the site or much knowledge about it, but here it is. The standard model is 20 feet tall, and the Zwarths, which are multiple pilot construct undead type creature things, are 30 plus feet tall. We can see here that the Zwarths have. If we go all the way down here, Zwarths are Zwarths as it has a spellcaster. It is capable of true spelljamming flight and can use mini weapons. Zwarths are magical power, spell projecting. They can fire spells. They can do spell amplification. They deal large amounts of damage. And hey, Hornetico, we are going to go through the process of converting a spirit warrior into the combat and exploration mechanics that we've been developing here on stream. So we're going to look at a few different factors. I've got a clipboard over here. We're going to look at scale. We're going to look at hit points. We're going to look at weapons, damage and reach. Weapon, damage and reach. And that's going to be probably a quick enough skinny for us to be able to kick through here for you guys to see how these massive constructs can work inside of a Spelljammer campaign. And since this entire document will be free for you to view as a sample on DMsGuild if you want, hopefully after reading the contents, you'll think it's worthy of purchasing. So this is kind of a sales pitch for the stuff that we've been building on top of setting ourselves up to make a fun little expansion piece to tie into the overall document, the Spirit Warriors expansion. So I'm really looking forward to that. Hornetico says, tally ho, it's almost midnight, but I am unable to sleep. Well, how about that? I'm starting off a little late tonight myself. So we're going to, let's break this thing down. Let's first talk about scale real quick. And if you're a veteran to my work and hung out with me on my channels for a while, you're probably going to be familiar with this. So I'm going to try to crash course through it without being too vague for the newcomers, but not being too boring for folks that have been here before. So looking at the document that we have gotten back from Adam in our post edits, still doing some revisions, but it's a pretty solid document. We're talking about spelljamming helms. We have a difference between major helms and minor helms being able to affect different scales and different speeds that ships can accommodate, which isn't particularly relevant to this conversation. But I just wanted to point out that we've got different scaling systems for different types of ships and the kind of movement and scale of distance they're expected to travel. Minor helms are for like fighter ships that are like anywhere from 10 to 50 feet in size, while major helms are for like true spelljamming vessels that are typically anywhere from, say, 75 to 250 feet. So major, huge ships, minor, small crafts. So those are the kind of things that you would equip into it. You could easily put into a mecha construct, a minor spelljamming helm. They only cost 500 gold. It requires focus, which is a very loosey-goosey, casual version of concentration. You can maintain concentration on a spell while you have focus, but to have focus, you need to be on or adjacent to the item that's providing it. Like you focus on a helm while you're occupying the space or adjacent to a helm. So you can focus your concentration into this device to empower the vehicle with your life essence so that you become the pilot. That is just stock standard for anything that is spell jamming. Drop one of these into a construct that can accommodate your space, you're pretty good to go. Looking at, I'm just going to scroll down here and just look at spell jamming ships in general, occupying space. We're looking at ships are scaled either at 5 foot or 50 feet, depending on if it's a craft that can be piloted by a minor helm, or if it's larger, like the 50-foot scale, which is something that a major helm would accommodate. So we'll skip past gravity planes and air bubbles, ship materials. Here's a list of the ships that we have. Here's the size that they are in length and width, various ships, the space that they occupy at the scale that they're at. And we've been building ship tokens on part of our spelljamming stream, and you can see how those are all being built in 50-foot squares. So a hammer ship, for example, fills a 250-foot space, which is a 5x5 space. Kind of like how a horse at the 5-foot scale would fill a 2x2 space, even though it's pretty thin. Spinning around and kicking at you and stuff like that, it's going to need to eat up a 10-foot space for it to be able to wheel around and kick you in the head, for instance, or to rear up and tap you with its front hooves while you got a knight on the back shooting you with an arrow or something. So it's that scaling, it's that space system that 5e has that we're already familiar with. We take off any kind of limits on how big those things can be to allow ships to scale up and to occupy different spaces. The amount of hit points that you have is double the length of your ship, or basically 10 hit points for essentially every 5 feet of space that you occupy. And then you've got like bonuses to saving throws. There's a weight capacity, and different materials provide different armor class and stuff, depending on how all that stuff goes. So, but what we're looking at are things that are like around 20 feet, which is crafts, smaller ships. So like, for example, we've got an illustration here, which we also have here in Photoshop that we've been building. This is still rough. We get to build tokens for these when we're done with all the vessels that we've been building tokens for, and we get to make like actual floor, like clean floor plans like you see in the Adventures in Space that Wizards of the Coast published. We'll duplicate that style and frame them into these fighter crafts that we've built. So we've got cuttlefish here, which are not counting its tentacles, which you can curl up and keep out of the way. We're looking at cuttlefish, which are basically 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. They're about 30 feet long and 5, 10, 15, 20 feet wide. You can see that they're big enough to be able to accommodate an actual ballista siege weapon on it, as can this manta ray ship that we built. That can have a front-loaded ballista on it. I mean, these could be catapults if you want instead. I just think ballistas look cooler, so that's what we went with. You got your piloting chair here, and you have your mounted orrery for long-distance scanning here. In the cuttlefish, you've got the pilot up front, and you got the orrery station behind it. You can focus both on a helm and an orrery at the same time. And if you are focusing on an orrery, we've got a bunch of fun rules down in the book here about finding small objects in space, like a tracking sonar system, so that you can hex crawl through wild space. You can easily see planets and stars in the system. They just pop up on your orrery display as, hey, these are massive objects, you should probably pay attention to them. But things that are really small in scale, like maybe 10 miles or less, don't just automatically pop up on your orrery. So you have to actually drift through wild space and find these small little objects. But if you use your orrery, you can do investigation, perception, as well as insight checks to feel out into space to see if there's things out there for you. And we provided all the mechanics for you to do that. And like a ranger gains advantages against favored foes and stuff like that. So you could be like a Nyogi hunter as a ranger and track down where Nyogi may be in this crystal sphere, and then literally hunt them down and butcher them. So, because, you know, maybe they stole your family or something when you were a kid, who knows. But this is the scale that we're operating with. So if we're going back to the book here, am I rambling enough already? Because we're already off radar, right? So if we're going to build I'm going to actually, I think, peel this out of its own document. If we're going to look at a spirit warrior, right? A standard model spirit warrior, 20 feet or 30 feet, right? We don't have to limit ourselves, but we'll start here. So we've got craft that are 20 feet, like the skiff, and 30, cuttlefish is supposed to be 30 feet. 30. Let me fix this real quick, post edit. Nah. I forget the calculation on that offhand. So I want to say it's... I'm going to have to come back and check it. I don't know the math off that just off the top of my head. But so we have a cuttlefish at 30 feet and we have a skiff at 20 feet. So if we're going to look at a map here, we can see a skiff. It's occupying a 5, 10, 15, 20, don't mind the point. 20 feet by 15 feet. And you got, again, the cuttlefish is 20 by 30 feet in size. But in scale, in the space that it occupies, we would be looking at a... Let's knock that all down to black. We would have 5, 10, 15, 5, 10, 15. Roughly a space like this is a space that a cuttlefish would actually occupy. 30 by... Let's fix that. There. A 30 by 30 space, right? While this would fill a 20 by 20 space. This elven flitter up here is a biggie, so it fills a 10 by 10 space. So that's a 50-foot ship that you're looking at. And then we got a bunch of these little, goblin blades here. They're like what, 5, 10. Like don't mind the points, and don't mind the tail. This thing is 15 by 15, so it's like roughly, like this is the space that this guy occupies here. And you can see it's too small to accommodate a ballista as well as a pilot's helm and an orrery. So these little guys, they just have a pilot's chair or helm and a mounted weapon like a javelin, like a harpoon thrower, a harpoon flinger, like from Infernal War Machines. So that's the way that scale works: 15 by 15, 30 by 30, the 20 by 20, right? And you got your character that's here. So like they're hanging out in these squares here. You got some guys that are working on the ballista here. So if we're talking about spirit warriors, right? These guys are going to occupy a 20 by 20 space. So let's just grab this guy real quick. Let's make a quick token out of him. There. It lined up. Nice size, Kearney. So you can see there, this is filling a 20 by 20 space, right? Because that illustration is totally realistic. But this is how tokens work, right? It just fills its 20 by 20 space, and there you go. So it would have the same stats, basic stats, as a craft has. And so looking at the craft here, like a 20-foot skiff, right? It's a 4x4 space that it occupies. It's got 40 hit points. It's got some basic stats for like making saving throws. It's got weight. It's got cargo hold. And it's got towing capacity. Oh, that's what it is. 9,000. Thank you. 9,000 minus cargo. There you go. So it has the same basic stats. So it fills a 4x4 space at the 5-foot scale. That's 20 foots. We know it's going to have, so let's go over to our document here. A basic one is 4x4, 20 feet. Hit points is 40. And then we'll look at weapons and reach. A quick comment and conversation about hit points. Let's go down into the combat section, and let's look at, let's see, where are my ship? Here we go, up here. Ship properties. Hit points. So ships have 10 hit points for each 5-foot square of space that they occupy. As listed in this pre-generated ship table below, for example, an 80-foot ship has 160 hit points, while a 20-foot ship has 40 hit points. When a ship is reduced to 0 hit points, it is destroyed and can no longer function until repairs cause it to regain 1 or more hit points. More details about ships taking damage are provided in the combat section below. So flipping down to the combat section, when you are piloting a ship, like I said, you're maintaining focus on the helm, and you kind of infuse your spirit and willpower into the ship to make the thing go. So, skipping past facing, maneuver, distancing, tactical movement, range of combat. We'll get into range here in a moment because that's gonna be fun to look at. But scaling, moving, maintaining. Resolving pursuits, ship rolls, pilots. Pilot ship statistic, taking damage from the ship. Okay, great. So when a ship is dealt damage, but the damage is below the threshold of the ship's material, no damage is taken as described in the materials above. This would be it would either have, depending on the type of material it is, if it was metal, like a heavy, there's heavy, there's composite, and there's light materials. Light materials at this scale, at the 5-foot scale, a light material has a damage threshold of 5, so you have to do at least 5 damage to damage it at all. Heavy craft have a 15 hit point threshold. 10. At the 5-foot scale, heavy have a 10 hit point threshold, so you have to do at least 10 damage to damage it at all. And at the composite would be 7. So light materials like ceramic, crystal, what's the ceramic, crystal, flesh. Then you have heavy material like stone, metal. Composite can be things like bone, chitin, as well as a mix of like light and heavy. Oh, wood. Wood was the other light material I hadn't thought of. So like if you have a mix of wood and metal on your ship, it's going to default to a composite material. So basically, as long as you're dealing 7 or more damage in a hit, you can actually damage this thing. Now we're looking at actually taking damage while focusing and not surprised. A pilot can use their own hit points to shield a ship from taking some or all damage dealt to it. The pilot can choose to take any amount of damage, leaving the remainder to damage the ship. For example, if a ship is within range of an effect of a fireball dealing 32 damage, the pilot can choose to take 10 and then leave the other 22 damage for the ship to absorb. So when we're looking at this, we know that these things only have 40 hit points, right? If you're a first level character with only 10 hit points, if you're in a fight riding in a spirit warrior, the DM's going to want to serve up CR1 things at you, and it just scales up to be able to match the scale of combat that you're working in, which we discuss in the book. But if you only have 10 hit points and you've got, say, a bolt thrower that's doing 3d8 damage to you, if it does 16 damage, it could kill you, but it's only going to do some damage to your ship, or in this case, the spirit warrior. So you could, say, take 4 points of damage and then leave the other 12 to the spirit warrior, and then use either a repair spell, or in the instance of a spirit warrior, since it's undead and is a creature type, then you would be able to use a healing spell, or like if you're a paladin that's piloting, you could use your heal on hands to either heal yourself or your ship. So it basically acts as a pocket of temporary hit points that you can heal back up again. So like if you have the arcane shield feature for being an abjurant wizard, for instance, you should be pretty used to having arcane wards on you to be able to have temporary hit points. Or if you are if you're a warlock, using the reflection damage spell, which I forget the name of offhand, someone in the comments will remind me, I'm sure. It builds a temporary hit point battery around you that you can then punish people doing damage from cold damage for trying to hurt, for successfully hitting you. This works that same way. It gives you a batch of temporary hit points. But At some point, it flips. So this machine will never have more than 40 hit points. If your fighter is running around with 80 hit points, then it is he who is going to be tanking the damage instead of, because you want to protect your ship. At low levels, the ship is protecting you and allowing you to travel around. At high levels, you are protecting your ship so you can continue to deal large amounts of damage and be able to move at incredibly fast speeds. So there is that flip, and that flip happens somewhere on crafts. It happens like around level 5 or 6. On full-size spelljamming vessels that have hundreds of hit points, it's going to happen somewhere around level 9 or 10, and we can look at that later as to why. Because siege damage, like when you get hit by a ballista, these things do a die times 10 damage, but if you take the damage for the ship, you drop the multiplier. So if a ballista hits you for, say, 30 points of damage, if the pilot decides to take the damage for the ship, instead of being dealt 30 damage, the pilot only takes 3. So you can see at really high levels, very strong characters, if they have, like, say, 115 hit points, they can take a shitload of hits from ballista fire. But at higher levels, they're going to be fighting gunships that can fire 6 or 7 ballistas at a time, dealing like 6 or 7 D4 damage at a time, which is more like fighting an adult dragon, for instance. So the actual CR scaling works pretty smoothly with what you're used to characters taking at the 5-foot scale, except that they have this floating battery of hit points that they use on their craft while they're piloting. So your team can work together. Action economy here. Let's see. So we have that. So let's get into action economy, and then we'll look at damage real quick, and then we'll just be able to riff off of this. So let's look at our roles. Here we go. Ship roles. There's a lot of proposal about different types of roles, but the title of ship role in Spelljammer Combat and Exploration is a misnomer. It's you're acting on a role, but you can act in multiple roles at the same time if you have enough action economy to choose other actions. Like, you can be a pilot as well as a siege commander and a squadron commander and a support character all at the same time if you have the action economy to do it. You can use an object interaction. You get a free object interaction each round, and you can use that to pilot your ship. You can move 5 squares, depending on what scale you're at is going to determine how much distance that is. You can also use an action to move the ship a second time, so you can move a total of 10 squares per round if you use your object interaction to pilot the ship, like that, literally steer it. And then you have an additional action that you can move it again. So you have the ability to move up to 10 squares at any given time if you just want to hustle. But you could also use your action to make attack and use iterative attacks as a pilot with ship melee weapons, which are like scorpion claws or elithid tentacles or rams that you have on your ship. In the idea of a spirit warrior, they have bows and they have swords and other melee weapons. So they have ship melee weapons that this, as a creature, as a humanoid shaped ship, would have access to. So we're going to rip on that after we look at those mechanics. But basically, if you are, say, an 11th level fighter that's piloting one of these spirit warriors, then you would have 3 attacks per round. You could then make 3 attacks with your ship melee weapon. There's also mechanics about siege weapons, commanding squadrons of ships, using the same action economy throughout the whole system. That these should all look very similar to what you already know in 5e. Disengage action, defend is kind of like a dodge action, but instead of giving disadvantage on everything, it grants you advantage to maintaining focus if you get hit, gives you a bonus to your armor class, and gives you advantage on dexterity saving throws, to avoid to avoid a crash or to prevent your ship from getting scuttled if somebody wings your gravity. And then bonus actions, you can also defend. You can disengage as a bonus action. If you hit a ship, you can scuttle it by ramming it and then basically making its gravity tilt. as a reaction to something trying to ramp up speed from, like, say, the 50-foot scale to the 500, a mile, 10, 100, up to 100 million miles. That's called scaling. You increase scale and you decrease scale, but when something's trying to outscale you and ramp up the size of the map so it can move away at a faster speed, you can pace it by using a reaction to pace it, which means that even though it's speeding up, you still maintain, like, say, you're 15 feet away and trying to board them. If they suddenly decide to hit light speed and hyper jump away from you, you can use a reaction to pace them so that you jump with them. So even while you're kicking through hyperspace, you're still only 15 feet away, so you can try to jump from ship to ship down a time tube, for instance. So that's what pacing is, and you know what an opportunity attack is. And deflect is, let's look at deflect real quick, hold on. Deflect is a reaction. Make a piloting check DC equal to 15 or the attack roll, whichever is higher. Rolling higher turns a hit into a miss. So it's kind of like a dodge roll with a minimum DC of 15. So that's basically your pilot actions, which are the only relevant actions for the conversation about a spirit warrior right now. So they can use ship melee weapons, right? So let's go take a look at ship melee weapons. We'll skip past the siege commander role right now, which is about firing siege weapons each round and reloading and commanding troops and commanding multiple siege weapons on deck at the same time, as well as squadron mechanics, which are identical to siege mechanics, but they also allow you to command ships to move, kind of like you're a pilot, but you're verbally commanding the pilots of all those ships to act in unison as a squadron. So that's the idea that goes on behind those things. And of course, you can blend all these roles. I could use a bonus action to command a fleet of ships to fire a halo of shots on the Imperial Citadel in light of Zaraxis, and then use my interaction to move my Spirit Warrior into position to then use my 3 attacks this round to use my, I don't know, gleaming, like my massive gleaming sword to do 3 siege weapon damage attacks this round against, I don't know, like a Night Spider ship that's coming up and fronting on me. So you can mix and match your actions like that. And so as long as you have an action available and you are able to communicate or act upon what you want to do, you're free to interact alongside anything you would do as a normal character. I want to say, I want to cast... say I want to cast haste on myself as a standard action. Now I have a bonus action I can make an attack with. I would then make an attack with that bonus action, but I could do it as a ship weapon instead of my own knife, for instance. So, looking at ship melee weapons, this is we rebuilt some of this to help differentiate between vessel siege scale weapons at the 50-foot scale versus mounted weapons on the smaller craft. And since a Spirit Warrior is the size of a craft, it would be using mounted weapon scale damage. So there's basically 3 things you can do with ships, which is grappling, ramming, and scuttling. You scuttle, which is knocking somebody's gravity, ramming, which is basically hitting something, and then grappling is what it sounds like. You lock up with a ship. Normally something you'd want to do before you start boarding it. Hit points and size. We talked about hit points already. Ship melee reach. So at this scale, okay. So if we're building a Spirit Warrior, and this Spirit Warrior is going to be, say, wielding a massive sword, right, or like a 50-foot switchblade, right, then it's going to have some reach to it. Generally, the way that D&D works is whatever the size your creature is equals the reach of your creature. A 5-foot creature can reach 5 feet away. A 10-foot creature can reach up to 10 feet away. A 15-foot creature can reach up to 15 feet away. A 20-foot creature can reach up to 20 feet away. Want to guess how far away a Spirit Warrior that's 20 feet, that's 20 feet in size, how far away it's going to be able to reach? The answer is 20 feet. So pretty easy. So if you got your guy, he's sporting a sword, then whack. Yeah, he'll be able to hit with his form. What is it? Form gleaming sword, form shining blade. I don't remember the Voltron phrase, but they make a giant sword and it hits things real good. So there you go. It has a 20-foot reach. Damage 20-foot reach, but like if this was a 40-foot spirit warrior, it would have a 40-foot reach instead. If it was a 150-foot spirit warrior, it would have a 150-foot reach. But at 150 feet, you'd be operating with 50-foot squares instead of 5-foot squares. Let's go take a look at that real fast. If we're going to scale out, let's look at scale. So here's your scale. At the 500-foot scale, here's just a sample map. We have to fix it. But there's a 500-foot scale, there's a 50-foot scale, and there's a 5-foot scale. 5-foot scale is where you put your characters. They're on the deck of the ship. This ballista is a 10 by 10 space. That's what we're looking at with craft here at these 5-foot scales, right? Each square pilot sits there. You got your orrery sitting there. Your ballista is occupying a 10 by 10 space. That means that these rams, these spiky rams, this 1, 2, 3, 4, these are not only legs, but they're also piercing rams. We'll go back and look at those in a second. So 5-foot scale, this is the scale of people. 50-foot scale, you can see a hammerhead ship, right? It's 250 foot long. It occupies a 50 by 50 space, a 5 by 5 space. On the 50-foot scale, that is now a 5 by 5 ship at the 50-foot scale. At the 500-foot scale, that hammer ship is basically a pixie. It is considered. It's basically small or perhaps even tiny at the scale of 500 feet. So the entire ship can easily fit inside of one 500-foot scale square. So at this 500-foot scale, that's larger than what the your Spirit Warrior's 20-foot weapon has the reach for. So what you would do is you would move, get adjacent to each other. If we're going to have this Spirit Warrior, I'm going to do that again. Actually, let's just grab this guy like this here real quick, and we'll just do copy paste there. We're going to grab this guy, and we're going to do that. So if this guy is going to run up and punch a Theurgy Spiderling's much bigger. You can see here that it's bigger in size. That's not a problem. It can still run up and smack this guy, right? So it has to be at the, if we're at the 50-foot scale adjacent to each other, the Spirit Warrior and the Theurgy, they're basically 50 feet apart. That's beyond the scale that you're able to attack because you only have a 20-foot reach with your sword. So what you would then do is during your movement, you can either increase or decrease the scale of the map as you attack. And we have a section in here about how do you lay that out, either on a VTT or how do you do that on a tabletop. How can you mix tabletop, VTT, and theater of the mind to have things operating at 3 different scales at the same time. In a virtual tabletop, I've shown samples of this before. On the virtual tabletop, you can literally lay out your VTT like this. This is only 30 squares by 20 squares. So you can have a very large plot of space for ships to maneuver and fight each other in, taking up minimal room. And once they engage at this 50-foot scale, now they can start looking at, ramming and grappling and slashing at each other with weapons at this smaller scale, because they can move 10, like if you want to just move your ship, you can automatically move 5 squares per round. And you kind of just stay inside of this space. If you actually want to move your ships, you'd be moving at the 500-foot scale. And you're engaging each other at this 50-foot scale. Because if you're maintaining the same distance with each other while you're fighting, and you're just traipsing across space at 500 or 5 miles or 10,000 miles per round, you don't. If there's nothing if there's no objective object that you would have in scale to say this is how big these things are, this plot of space could be 100 miles or it could be a million miles. There is no difference in the scale. They're just squares. And as long as your ship is capable of moving that many squares per round, you can just change the scale and just note what scale you're at. And your ship either your enemies either use reactions to maintain scale with you, so they can stay within this 50-foot space, even though you're moving at 1,000 miles per round right now, the same they could if we were only moving 5 feet per round. So that relative distance remains the same, which is a fascinating subject for when we finally get to the constellaire creature later on. That is a very interesting creature. I'm looking forward to talking about that, but I want to wrap this up first. So this is how that scale works. And since the original Spirit Warrior creature is only 20 feet in scale, that means you have to literally get to this 20-foot scale to be able to attack other ships. But if we had a Spirit Warrior that was, say, 100 feet tall, and it filled a 2x2 space at the 50-foot scale, then if it were to find itself in a angry conversation, say, with the Hammerhead ship here, let's go back to our map and drop in our hammer ship real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's our Hammerhead ship, right? And in comparison, here is our I'm trying to press buttons. Thank you. Here's a Spirit Warrior ship, right? So these two guys can exist together at the 50-foot. I'm going to try to line that up a little. That's pretty good. So these guys are at the 50-foot scale right now, right? And this is a 100-foot Spirit Warrior now. We built a 100-foot ship. So now if we are, as long as we are within 100 feet of this ship, then I can attack with my Spirit Warrior sword attack. And even though this is showing, even though this appears to be like blank space, it's not. It's kind of like how a horse takes up a 10-foot space, even though that horse is about this wide inside of its 10-foot span. You know, you got your happy cowboy here, and he's got his, he's riding on the back of, he's riding around on his horse, right? It's still occupying a 10-foot square, even though that horse is only like 4 feet wide, right? Because it can turn and kick at you, it can maneuver, it's D&D. That's how they resolve space in D&D. So in Spelljammer, because it's D&D, we resolve it the exact same way. It makes sense. So Spirit Warrior, 100 feet, attacking the Hammerhead ship. So if the Hammerhead ship wants to ram the Spirit Warrior, it has to be within 50 feet, right? It has to be adjacent to it, because a 50-foot scale ship, like a 5-foot scale person punching you, has to be adjacent to you to be able to make that punch or that ram attack. So similarly, a ram attack from a ship has to be adjacent. So at the 50-foot scale, if it moves up here to the 50 feet, it can now ram the Spirit Warrior, dealing ramming damage. But if the Spirit Warrior is wielding a large magic sword, for instance, then again, it can hit up to 100 feet away, because it itself is 100 feet in size if it's using a large two-handed weapon. If it's only using a one-handed weapon, then it would only have a 50-foot reach, just like if it was holding a longsword. But if it has a weapon with reach, then it would have a 100-foot range. It's the same as D&D. So, let's look again at weapon damage real quick, just to lock down how much damage these guys are gonna do. Weapon damage. Ship only weapons. Effects of grappling, breaking a grappling, ramming, scuttling, hit point and effects of scuttling with hit points, ship melee reach, get rid of that extra line, ship melee weapons, rams. Okay, so here we go. Depending on how much space your ship occupies, depends on what kind of damage it deals. And there's a difference in scale between vessels at the 50-foot scale and crafts at the 5-foot scale. Can you notice the difference in scale and what that scaling difference may be? The answer is 10. Everything works in 10s here. 5 foot, 50 foot, 500 feet, 1 mile, 10 mile, 100 mile, 1,000 miles. And then 1,000 miles is the maximum speed that a major helm can move per square. They can move up to 10,000 miles in a 6-second segment, or they can move up to 100,000 miles in 1 minute. Or if we keep scaling out, in 1 day, they can move 100 million miles. So you have this sense of times 10 scale from 5 feet to 1 mile, from 1 mile to 100 million miles. It all just curves up in size and scales down to the minimum of 5 feet. So depending on the size of creatures that you're operating with, depends on the size of the battlefield that you're going to have, which you're going to see a ton of when we get into the in command of squads and armies, converting the Dragonlance campaign into our mass combat system that uses these same basic ideas. So you can see here that a vessel, depending on how big the vessel is, depends on what kind of a die it throws. Worth noting, there are no vessels in Spelljammer that's published that are larger than 250 feet. Squid ships and hammer ships are the biggest at 250. Though, in the second edition, they had dwarven fortresses that could fill 1,000 foot space. The Armada, the Spelljammer Armada, 500 foot space. The Spelljammer Armada filled a 500 foot space and carried on it 150-foot flitters, and we have those flitters here on deck with us as well. So this 50-foot flitter could fit on a 500-foot scale Armada ship. It has these hardened... I've talked about these before. You can go back into the playlist and look at me talking about Armadas. So we look at the size of it, and so if we're looking at a 20-foot, that's 4 squares. So 3 or 4 squares size is... it is 2d6 damage. So it would do 2d6 damage at the... It is a 4x4. It can do 2d damage, and you can do anywhere from 1 to... let's look at our action economy again, real quick. You can have a number of attacks equal to what your character could have. So like an 11 level fighter can make 3 attacks. Bonus actions, you can make an attack as well, so you can use your attack and a bonus attack to make attacks. Attack. And then, so that means that you can make at least 2 up to 5 attacks in a round. So you're doing 2d6, so at this scale, you would be doing 2d6 damage per attack. Doesn't sound like a lot. If you had instead a 40-foot ship that would have 80 hit points, already a much stronger vessel, right? Just going back down to the weapons. Ranged weapons. Ramming, slashing, weapon equals, there you go. Great. So you're going to have anywhere from 2, a fighter would have 3, an 11th level fighter would have 4 attacks per round, each doing 2d6 damage. If instead you wanted to have a siege-sized weapon, it would be a 2-handed weapon. It would have reach. It would have a 50-foot reach, and it would instead deal 2d6 times 10 damage. So it would be a significantly larger weapon. So you would be able to upscale to have just a BF sword that would be dealing this massive damage against vessels. A hammerhead ship has 250 hit points plus however many hit points its pilot has, and you would be able to deal with a siege-sized glaive. You would be doing 2d6 times 10 damage each hit. So on average, you'd be doing 60 damage. If that pilot isn't willing to take any hit points, and again, it's siege, so you scale it down. If your average hit's going to be 60 damage with the siege glaive, then if the pilot wants to take all that damage, then the ship takes 0 and the pilot would take 6. If you're dealing with a typical normal human pilot who only has like maybe 15 hit points, he'll take 2 or 3 hits maybe, and then get really, really concerned that he's going to die piloting this vessel. So he's going to start letting the ship tank its damage, and it's only going to be able to take 4 or 5 hits like this before that hammerhead ship is destroyed. So in this sense, you can take these Voltron type these super mecha and attack things at that scale. If we were to instead have like an Evangelion sized 500-foot scale ship construct, so that let's just keep it simple and say it's just a single 500-foot scale, right? If you're going to have it deal with massive weapons that are able to increase its size, it wouldn't be dealing with one square. It'd be 2d4 times 10 damage normally, but if it's a 500-foot scale creature, it would be doing 2d4 times 100 damage. And it would be fighting things that don't have 250 hit points. They would have 2,500 hit points. And we're going to look at stuff like that, like the Citadel of the Imperial Citadel in Light of Xeraxis, the conversion guide that we have in this. It sits inside of a 1 mile square, which is 5 foot, 50 foot, 500 foot, 500, 550, 500, 5,000, which is 1 mile. So that goes from singles to tens to hundreds to thousands. You're now dealing with, it fills the mile, so that's 10 squares. So it has like 10,000 hit points. So it's going to be able to take a crap ton of damage. That's going to take a long time for your Spelljammer ship to whittle through, dealing 30 points of damage at a time. Like, you would need even a full squadron of 30 ships that they give you in Act 4. It's still only going to be doing like around maybe 200 or 300 hit points at a time. The thing has 10,000 hit points. You are going to be destroyed by incoming fire by the size of that citadel before you're able to actually do any meaningful damage to the facility as a whole, which is why you need to follow the adventure, land on it, go to the actual temple, and disrupt the whole scene by, you know, like Flash Gordon style, play football and confuse them for a while. That's my recommendation. But that's the super quick skinny on how Spirit Warriors would work with this system. It's almost identical to how Craft already work in this game, except that you're able to change the scale of weapons that you're using. You would be able to override the base damage that these things do. Like, you could craft a 50-foot scale, say, two-handed axe, which is going to do, like, instead of 2d6, maybe it would do 2d12 damage per hit, for instance. And of course, these things, when they crit, they double the dice. So if you crit, you do 4d6 instead of 2d6. And then you can, of course, supersize your weapon by making it a reach weapon that requires 2 hands. And then it'd be able to upscale. Instead of doing 2d6, it'd be able to do 2d6 times 10. So, but if you swatted at something, that vessel, the pilot, again, would be able to reduce that damage back down to the base 2d6. So when you're fighting at the 2d6 scale against creatures or against smaller craft, then the 2d6 scale is actually pretty appropriate. If you're dealing with Spelljammer vessels and you're upscaling, then go ahead and use your siege weapon for the times 10 damage. But again, if you downshift to fighting craft, you're only going to be able to, the pilot can absorb that damage and reduce it by 10. Here's an interesting footnote. If you can't take a siege weapon like a 50-foot long sword and hit a halfling with it, which is like 4 feet tall. If it's scaled down too small, it's too small of a target. Like, you can take a siege size 10 times damage weapon and attack any vessel or anything larger. It's huge. You can hit it. If it's smaller than 50 feet, you're automatically going to be at disadvantage to attack with it. So like craft, like those spiraling craft that we have flying around, you could swat at these things. If you have a 50-foot weapon and you're trying to swat at like one of these little goblin blades that's only 15 feet large, it's kind of like trying to. It's almost like the opposite of fighting tiny creatures at the 5-foot scale. That it's so small, it's kind of hard to hit it accurately with the weapon that you're firing at it. And then if the target is less than 50 feet tall and it has cover, that cover prevents you from being able to make any attack with a siege weapon against it. You'll just automatically miss, because the amount of precision needed to hit the target that's open is literally smaller than the rock that you're throwing at his face off of a catapult. So it's impossible to hit something that has cover if it's smaller than 50 feet in size. It's too small in scale for you to effectively hit. So while creatures are running around on Spelljammer vessels, looking at our document again here real quick for reference, if they're running around on the ship like this, If they're at a siege weapon, they automatically have half cover, which means you can't target them with siege weapons. But the siege weapon itself, you could attack if it doesn't have it, because unless it's built into like a defense, into a defense turret that gives it cover, then you wouldn't be able to attack it. But if it's just out on an open deck, you'd be able to attack the siege weapon, and it has the same hit point scaling, and whoever is commanding that siege weapon has the same ability to absorb damage for the siege weapon, so it doesn't just get destroyed with one shot. Similarly, if you're just running around top deck, like say over here, if you're just running around on the deck, if you're adjacent to these walls, those walls give you partial cover. So that means that you can't get shot while you're hugging a rail on the deck of your ship. So while your characters are on a ship, they are safe from being shot for 60 or 150 points of damage. So low-level characters can still operate and engage on the ship without worrying about being just splattered immediately. Which is why you need fighter craft that operate at this 5-foot scale, because their weapons, except for these giant siege weapons, but the mounted weapons like those mounted ship weapons and like the harpoon flingers, they're able to target small things, and they deal with cover and stuff like everything else does. But it's basically just, it's such a large weapon that your character can't just carry it offhand. It has to be mounted to a ship, directed and fired at, like a harpoon flinger. Or if it's like, you've got your spirit warrior with like progressive knives, for instance, then it's going to be doing that 2d6 mounted damage because it's a giant weapon. But it's still able, if it can crawl into your ship and stab at your crew, it can just skewer your crew and just throw them off the ship and slowly whittle off your crew by grabbing and plucking and throwing them off the ship, or skewering them and killing them off, disabling the siege weapon. And again, these craft can actually target the siege weapons even if they're being covered. But again, your character, like say your ranger, is the siege commander for your ballistas on the ship. So whenever a ballista gets attacked, the ranger can choose to take damage for it instead, because that's how siege weaponry works in this command system that we're using. So that's a super quick skinny about how these spirit warriors work. Almost all the mechanics that you need to be able to run these in your game. All you gotta do is put a minor helm in them, or if you want to spin the coin, a major helm, so that they can truly fly from star system to star system at convenient speeds. You've got the same damage, you got the same hit points. Basically, all it's letting you do is just run around in a mecha suit, as opposed to skittering around in a spider. But again, when you're empowering your ship, you kind of animate it. There was the Bat ship in the Realm Space compendium, the Realm Space supplement in 2nd edition. The Bat ship was basically possessed by a ghost, and it had a spirit that dwelled inside of it, and it was able to move its limbs and make bite attacks and act like it was an actual giant beast, but it was just it was like 80 feet long. So, but it operated the same way. So when you are piloting one of these Spelljammer and you focus on the helm, it infuses the ship with your spirit. So this spiraling isn't just flying along as a stale ship. It's all of its limbs are active, and I talk about this like crawling around the deck of a ship and using its front limbs to just skewer the ship over and over again, like digging, like in the Matrix when the Squiddies found the Nebuchadnezzar. The Nebuchadnezzar is a vessel. The Squiddies are 15-foot vessels that jump onto the ship and start using their tentacle attacks to start clawing their way through the ship, dealing enough damage to dig into the vessel, to dig under deck, to find the fleshy humans inside, to start skewering them as they go along. Like those Squiddies we can do those exactly. You can have Squiddies versus Spirit Warriors in your campaign if you want, and all these things. A 20-foot squid ship can, a 20-foot Spirit Warrior can easily just hang off the bottom deck of your ship. It doesn't hang off because the gravity plane reverses the gravity. You just basically strap it in so it doesn't just get knocked loose during a scuttle. But you can load up the undercarriage of your ship with crap loads of fighter ships, landing skiffs, and Spirit Warriors for you to be able to just, like the Armada ship, just unleash a torrent of small fighter craft. If you've got the money and the manpower to do it, you can flood a space, you can flood a field with squadrons of ships that your characters can command as easily as they would be able to command, say, a summoned bear, for instance. You got 3 of these, like we've got 3 of these goblin darts sitting inside of a 50-foot square. You can command all 3 of the blades. You can command all 3 of these blades together as a single squadron that basically acts as a single ship. They're occupying a 3x3 square each. That means they are effectively, as a unit, a 9x9 squad inside that 50-foot square, which means they have 90 hit points instead of just 30 apiece. And the squadron commander is using the orrery on the deck of the ship to focus on the orrery, to zoom in, focus on those ships. And the pilots using their minor spelljamming helms, which are super cheap. They can only go 1,000,000 miles a day, not 100 million. So they need a larger ship to support and carry them, just like an X-fighter, like an X-wing fighter would need to have a Corellian carrying them to dock them so they can make the long distance, so they can deploy at this lower, smaller scale of space combat. But you can just have a shitload of these things all decked up, and then you can launch them, and this would just be all 3 of these ships. You would just operate as though they were 3 siege machines, operate in sync together, dealing basically 96 damage per pop. Or if you had a bunch of, like if you had 2 hammerhead ships side by side in a 500-foot scale, that'd be 5x5, and 5x5 is 10x10. Those ships would basically be doing, like, say, 10d8. It'd be doing 10d8 times 10 damage, or if you wanted to simplify it, d8 times 100 damage. So that's how these things fold together. And it is 9:30, so I'm going to grab a hot sip of water. Well, it's going to be cold water, but I'm going to grab a sip of water, and then I want to talk about these other creatures real quick. Because there's 2 other creatures that were in that Dungeon Dad had shown in the in his video, and I really encourage you to like and subscribe to Dungeon Dad, and just keep an eye on Monster of the Week, because there's pure gold that he's putting out every week. That is great content. But just him flipping through the book, showing off just how weird the creatures are. In Spelljammer, we caught a glimpse of 2 of them. We caught a glimpse of the Constellate, and he also drifted past the Great Dreamer. So I'm going to look at the Great Dreamer first. See, Spelljammer 2nd edition had the same scale, 100 million miles movement. But they didn't really focus, they didn't break down the scale as precisely as we are with 5e today, using our supplement. But they had creatures that they were thinking this way. Since these ships can, like the Spelljammer itself is like 2.5 miles wide and 1 mile long. It's a massive manta ray. Let's go look at our manta ray real quick. This is basically what the Spelljammer looks like, the actual Spelljammer ship, except that instead of a ballista and a helm and an orrery, it has an entire city on it, right? So this is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 squares across, right? So if each one of these squares were to be, say, 2,500 feet, right? Half a mile. If each square was half a mile, then this would basically be a 3.5 mile wide, and what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It'd be a 3 by 3.5 mile size vessel, or basically super ship, right? Not quite large enough to have spherical gravity like a planet, but certainly asteroid worthy. Like if this thing rammed into the Rock of Brawl is smaller than this. The Rock of Brawl in comparison is basically, I want to say the Rock of Brawl is roughly this big. So if the Spelljammer came through and just casually bumped into this guy, what would that be? This is going to be within the mile scale. So you got 5 feet, 50 feet, 500 feet, 1 mile scale, 3 miles. So it'd be ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. It'd basically be doing, 4, 6. It'd basically be doing D8 times 1,000 damage if it just casually rammed into the side of the Rock of Brawl. And the Rock of Brawl probably has like around maybe 15,000 hit points or so, maybe 20,000. So it only takes like 4 or 5 attacks from the Spelljammer itself to be able to just utterly destroy the Rock of Brawl. Which is why people are terrified of the Spelljamming ship to show up in their system. Because God knows what it's going to eat. Because it's going to eat a lot. It would happily come across and graze the underbelly of the Rock of Brawl, destroying the entire forest in probably a matter of rounds before it just scooped up and flew off. Probably heading for Toril to eat, to eat Cholt. Like that's like if you were playing Doomed Forgotten Realms by Matthew Whitby, that's on the DMsGuild. The Spelljammer vessel itself would be a fantastic addition, and in fact, that's a super great idea. Matthew's a great guy. I've worked with him before. I would, maybe he'd be hip with me building a Doomed Forgotten Realms expansion as like a promo piece to both my Spelljammer mechanics and Doomed Forgotten Realms by making the Spelljammer scenario real. The Spelljammers come to feast upon your forest. So the Great Wood, most of Cormyr, Am, definitely Cholt. Those guys are all dust. Like the Moonshae Islands, snacks. The Spelljammer would just absolutely feast upon those places. So that would be a fun Doomed Forgotten Realms piece to consider building out. So there's just so much stuff we can do with these mechanics. It's amazing. Which is the next conversation point I wanted to talk to. Let's look at the Great Dreamer real quick. This is plucked from 2nd edition. I don't have any affiliate with the website. I just did a Google search and this is what we got. So the size of these things is gargantuan because that's a thing. But it shows here it's anywhere from 10 to 20 miles in size, right? So that's a 10 mile square, right? If these guys are operating, if the Rock of Brawl and the Spelljammer are operating at the mile per or half mile maybe here, but like in general a mile square. The Great Dreamer is operating at a space of, the Great Dreamer is going to be anywhere from 10 miles to 20 miles in size. There you go. Still too small to have spherical gravity, but it's absolutely massive. It could absolutely support an entire ecosystem, and it has an entourage. It's so massive that it comes with an entourage. So let's look at its attacks. Let's see the kind of damage that this thing would do. It would be times 10k. So 5. Let's just play for a minute. 5. We'll build the chart. 50, 500, 1 mile, 10 miles. So that's 1, 10, 100. Oh, look at that. It's all lined up. 1,000, 10,000. And we're generally going with a scale of 1 or 2. 1 or 2, that'd be a D4. So it would be doing D4 times 10,000 damage per attack as the Dreamer. And what is its scale? Well, its scale is probably going to be weird. But I would say this is probably a CR 29, 57, something like that. So it's gonna be rocking. It's gonna have what, 20,000 hit points itself. Oh wait, no, it's 10 times square times 10,000. So this thing's gonna have 200,000 hit points at this scale. So on average, it's going to deal 40 damage, 20 damage per hit on its own, just as a single bite. So that means it's going to take roughly 10 bites. If 2 of them got in a fight, it'd basically take 10 bites for one of them to die. So there you go. Not if 2 humans were beating each other to death, they're on average going to do 1 or 2 damage. So yeah, maybe 5-10 hits are gonna kill each other. It's all the same. So it's just a much larger scale. But these things have this entourage that flies along with them. Meow, 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 meow. I just love the sense of scale that they have in these things. Crushing blow, weather pattern. There we go. Within its realm, they travel through space in a spherical envelope of airy water so large that weather patterns occur on its surface, creating the image of an immense elemental whale swimming through the cosmos. Within it swims the dreamer's entourage, which is a few like leviathans, which are like krakens, and then some sentient creatures. So it has its crew, its posse running around with it. It's at the 10-foot scale. It could easily have a bunch of like 1 mile size like cuttlefish at the 1 mile scale, and it could have a bunch of Kandori that are like 700 feet long, can easily hang out with this massive creature, no problem. It would be great to have it like say as a like for it to be a Kuo-toa god, and so it's an evil. So it's an evil dreamer, and its great dream is to destroy the universe or to have Kuo-toa rule it wherever it dwells. So all of its Kuo-toa creatures, like they'd be like Cynic from Ravenloft or from Ravnica, creating these super creatures like these mega squids that spit poison gas clouds and deal electric damage whenever they grapple you and stuff like that. That are like 800 feet long or maybe 2 miles long. These leviathans that they're genetically building on the back of these great dreamers. That's a really fun, cool scenario. We could build like mega scale combat or something like that once this thing gets published. That'd be like an easy 5-page adventure encounter thing that we could just throw out there as a level 17 plus adventure idea if your character's running around in space. But I wanted to look at real quick before we ended today. I wanted to look at the Constellate, which is by far the coolest of creatures. So I want to take a look at this guy with you. Size. Anywhere from 1 to 1 million miles in size. That's a pretty broad range, right? Let's actually take a look at what this thing is. Combat. There we go. If it wishes, the Constellate can melee, or can battle at up to its full size. Wait. No, this is actually where we want to be. So apparently there's some sort of like druid class from second. I don't remember this in second edition, and I don't want to go clicking around the links I don't know. But basically there's like we're talking about Kuo-toa Dreamer or something like that. It's basically a spirit shaman. This may very well be from this. Honestly, this feels like a Maztica idea, but I can't tell for sure right now. I'll have to look it up. But so it's saying if you summon a Constellate, its nature changes radically. Witnesses can see an immense shadowy figure shaped like the constellation drop down from the heavens. The stars diffuse and move randomly within the Constellate's body, kind of like Nyx from Theros, by the way. It can change size at will, usually to maintain its size relative to the viewer. For instance, a panther constellate seems to remain panther size, whether in the sky or on a ship's deck. The constellate gains the special abilities of the character object that it portrays, blah, blah, blah. If it wishes, the constellate can melee at up to its full size, often millions of square miles. And then they add their own exclamation point because they're trying to impress themselves even. So the full-size constellate can crush with its enormous bulk, dealing ridiculous amounts of damage. So if we're talking about millions of miles, so this is what I think is so freaking cool about this. So let's say, let's just take this dude, right? let's just use this guy as our quick case study. Let's pretend this. Let's just pretend this the Spirit Warrior is a Panther Constellate for a moment, right? And let's stay true to size for what a panther is, right? A panther is a 5 foot is a medium sized, I believe, is a medium sized creature. So if we had a Constellate and it was on deck with us on our ship, and you're just looking at it there, and it's like say it's perched on the railing on the side of your deck of your ship at the 5 foot scale, it's a panther. There it is. But if it lifted its feet off of the deck and just lifted off of your ship, while you're looking at it, it's still 5 feet. But in reality, it's actually scaled out to the 1,000,000-mile range. But it's so far away from you, from your ship, that proportionately, it still looks like it's only 5 feet right off the edge of your deck. Except that it's actually 100 million miles in scale. It's massive, but it's so huge and so far away that its scale, its perception hasn't changed in instance. It's kind of like how Doctor Strange hid the time stone from Thanos by making it appear as a star. You look at the sky, and there's like this Demir symbol here. It's in this nether space, right? But what if I was able to just pluck that, right? Here, I'm gonna try to be clever here real quick. So forgive me if this doesn't go right. But I'm gonna just grab this real quick, and we're just gonna bring it over here on the deck. And we're just going to plop it down here as a spiderling. Right? This spiderling is the same, is effectively, it's being curmudgeon-y, but it's effectively the same size as that, as this Demir symbol here, right? This Demir symbol has no actual size. But if we scale down, what are we looking at? This is roughly that big in scale here. So if we zoom in, that's roughly 15 feet. So this Demir symbol next to my head is a 3x3 space at the 2-inch scale. But if we were to instead do that. If we were then just to pan out to the 50-foot scale, it's now 150 feet instead of 6 inches. Or if we were to scale out again to the Rock of Brawl, it's now 3 miles in size. But it's still, see, even though the Rock of Brawl is, there we go, got it to work. Even though the Rock of Brawl is 3 miles, it still looks like it's roughly the same size as this Demir symbol. This circle here of the mirror is roughly, what is that? That's roughly a 3 square circle that we're looking at there. But there's zero, this Demir symbol could be millions of miles away in the sky, or it could literally be right here for me to pluck and then just move over onto the map. There you go. So I love the Constellate like that. It can scale up to any size. It can shrink down to 5 feet. It could slap you with a claw for like D6 damage, or it could scale up to 100 million miles and just devastate your planet. 10,000. Let's keep stacking this just to see how absurd this crap can get. So 5 miles, 50 miles, 1 mile, 10 mile, 100 miles, 1K miles, 10, 100, 100K miles, 1 million miles, 10 million miles, 100 million miles is the maximum size that it has. So that goes from 10K to 100K to 1 million to 10 million to 100 million. Sorry, that's supposed to be, million to a billion, to 10 billion, to 100 billion. So it'd be doing D6 times 100 billion damage is what it would be doing at the 100 million miles square. It'd be able to move 10 squares around. So it would just be able to traipse across the universe in literally no time at all and eat Tauril without even thinking about it. If you can get its attention and scale it down, you could maybe even capture it in a bag of holding. And so you could literally keep the universe in your bag if you wanted to by capturing that very angry constantly. Do not open that bag. And don't even think about chucking it into a portable hole, because that's just going to release it into astral space. As soon as that thing goes boom into astral space, it's just going to balloon out to 100 million miles and just eat the damage that would have been caused as though it hadn't even happened. And now it's going to come looking for you, and it knows where you are because it can find you through void tracking. Anyway, that's my thoughts about Spirit Warrior, the Constellate, the Great Dreamer, scaling damage, and the flexibility of an infinite mechanic that it seems like 2nd edition knew about it, and 5e it was too much of a lift for 5e to translate it. So that's what we've been doing. We've been taking that effort to take this ridiculous idea of scale that 2nd edition gifted us with through Spelljammer, that we have the opportunity to expand when Planescape comes out, to see how the Astral Sea is going to curve into the planes of infinite, in the inner sphere, in the inner planes, the outer planes, the Great Modron March. We've already talked about the Blood War at the beginning of the Spelljammer series, as well as the In Command series that we have as a separate playlist. There is just a ton of stuff that we can do with this. So I've got to get back to work and get this thing published for everybody, so we can just start looking at this. So I can punch out the Scaver Knight Brigade, so I can create the quick book on just flesh out Spirit Warriors and different types of weapons that they can use, and just make them a little bit more fun, instead of just like, this is a very boiled down, like, here's your quick and skinny, here's how you do stuff, these are all the tools that you need to make up everything that you want. But then I can make a pay what you want, like Spelljammer Combat Exploration scaling weapons. And then I can do like a little tear out for like Kandorian the Great Dreamer. And then I can do like the Constellate. And we can like flesh out Spirit Warriors. I was going to hold off on doing giant mecha like that until we finish the Squads and Armies book that we're building for Dragonlance, so I can finally build the Warforged supplement, the Warforged Army supplement, where we're looking at what the Warforged were like at the height of their power 200 years ago or whatever, when Sire was still here, and they and Braylon were creating all these technological super weapons to battle on. This is the stuff. This is how we build those things. This is how we build 500-mile Modron marches. This is how we build Constellates and Giant Kandori and the Great Dreamer and these. This is exciting stuff, and the scaling works. We've had playtesting with it. We know it works. We've had enough playtesting with enough situations at different scales. It's solid. It's super solid, and I am so looking forward just to having this out there for you guys to look at, and just to have it start folding into the other stuff that we're building. So big shout out to Dungeon Dad for even just pointing our eyes in this direction and inspiring our hearts to be thinking about gaming in a bigger way than we have before. We're dreaming larger than Wizards of the Coast can imagine, and hopefully they're going to start paying attention to what creators are doing out here and trying to bring us in to help build a better game, or at least prop up creators that are really trying to push the margin and to bring all that stuff from 2nd edition back into 5e as something practical that people can use. Whether 1D&D is going to actually work with 5e or not, and whether anybody actually wants it, or if it's just going to be a 4e throwaway. Now that CC is out there, and the DMsGuild is still allowing us to use all the content from 2nd edition to be able to punch this stuff out, there really is no limit to anything that we want to do in our games. And I think that's the most exciting thing about it, to be able to build tools like this that help bring the idea of kingdoms and empire and just ridiculous fantasy epic scale back into your games. I think that's just missing from the game system. So that's all I have for now. I stream every morning. We're going to be back tomorrow morning working on the Eberron graveyard map that we've been working at for the past couple weeks, and it's just about done. This weekend, we're going to have an opportunity to finish up the text revisions for this document and get that back to Adam Hancock, who did Elf and Orc Had a Baby. He also did the fantastic Baldron's Guide to Kingdom Building. He's a rock star, and I'm thrilled to have him on as our editor. Ukulele Bard is just fantastic with building scales and making math work and building scaling systems. A lot of appreciation to him, helping me figure out how this scaling mechanic system can actually work at all. I'm really excited about taking the next step with you guys, and I hope you stick around. So like, subscribe. If you know where I'm at on Discord, give me a shout. Catch me on Twitter at Phil Kearney. And check out my stuff on the DMsGuild. Link down below. Everything that I publish, you can always read them cover to cover. But I also like to provide a lot of assets and tokens and maps and play mats and things that you can use at your game table to make different things work. And I love doing illustrations. All the art in those books are mine. So just grab them, open them up, and flip through them just to see the art, just to see the ideas and see how everything folds together. And just to try to build more out of your D&D games than what there is currently. So that's all I got for now. I'll be back in, it's 10 o'clock now. I'm going to be back in about 8 hours. So, Hornetico, I hope you were able to fall asleep to this. And for anyone else that's new, I hope this actually woke you up and got you something to be excited about with Spelljammer. Something that, and like I said, we got about a 20-page break. I'll just show you guys real quick since we're here. We have the here's the system generator we have using the scaling method to be able to show you how to easily map star systems using just a square grid, not a hex. I don't like using hexes. The reason we have hexes is because TSR didn't know how to build an overland thing, so they just said use Avalon Hills thing. They use hexes, so you're going to use hexes too. They could have used squares, and if you use squares, you can do a scaling system like this. But I mean, if you use square, if you're going to use a scaling system that smoothly flows from 5 feet to 100 million miles, you're going to want to stay on a square grid, so that you can just make the ships do like they're supposed to do, so you can smoothly scale in and out by changing the scale perspective. But we have a full system conversion here. We plot out the Zarixa space, Doom space, as well as realm space, talking about like the speed of moons moving around planets, how spherical gravity works, traveling inside of spherical gravity, and how long it takes to escape it. We have a fun little section here talking about how even though you can move 100 million miles today, Toriel's only 8,000 miles wide. And if you're trying to get to a cottage that has a really tasty pecan pie, and that cottage is only 20 feet, if you're moving more than a mile per round, you're going to fly right past it. Like, you're going to move 1 mile, and it's like, damn, that cottage is way back there. I have to scale down to a stop so that I can just park my ship above Aunt May's cottage, drop the ladder, and slide down and spend some time with your grandma. Have some pecan pie. But further down in the document, we got almost. I don't think there's anything in here that we don't have an answer for. Mutinies. We have the costs of hiring crew, the level of skill that they bring to the table, different wildstorm systems that you can encounter. We also have the clouds of doubt, astral doubt, which is when you're flying through. When you hit this cloud, it disrupts your concentration, and it screws up how long it takes for you to get to your destination because it makes you lose focus on what your destination was in the first place. We've converted all the creatures that are in Boo's Menagerie to work on this scaling system. So if they're larger than 50 feet, they're working on this siege damage, attacking ships. Or if they're smaller, how do you deal with just ships move? How do you just deal with creatures moving through space? like scavers hunting things. We have a little section on like if you have a spell jamming crab, like a little hermit crab that just scuttles along the side of rocks and just eats the plankton that lives off of the light coming from the central star of the system that's around it. The crab doesn't have to breathe. All it needs to do is just eat its little plankton and absorb light. Like, that's how unusual beasts work. So you can create all these super cool little ecosystems in space that creatures can develop from, that you can create these fun little encounter regions in. You got the random system generator here on size, types of planets, scale. Here's a random system that we're building. This is at the 200 million mile scale of squares. Different type of atmosphere, different visibility and air quality. The different types of moons that you can build out of these things, the type of inhabitants. And these are really fun charts. Yeah, like if you roll on your D20, if you roll a 19, you're going to roll a D8 and you're going to add 8 to the table, ignoring any result that's below 11, including the plant food. So like you're going to roll a D8 and then you're going to add 10. So it's going to be anywhere from 9 to 18. So that means that on this rock, you could have, if you rolled a 9, you could have beasts, humanoids, monstrosities, aberrations, elementals, fae, and undead. Except that you don't have any food. There's no natural plants on this planet. So like the undead, the fae, like maybe the undead are feeding off the humanoids, and the humanoids are forced to eat maybe elementals, or they're forced to eat fae. Like there's some sort of bizarre dystopian society that got built out of the weird evolution of this planet. Like just fun stuff like that. And then we have the second appendix is the entire conversion of Light of Xeraxis out of 115 pages. Jesus. We're on page 85 of 115. So there's about 30 pages just bolted onto the end of this for you to use all these mechanics we were talking about and just fold them into Light of Xeraxis. So if you want to run that adventure, you bought the box set for Spelljammer's Adventure in Space, or maybe you got it on D&D Beyond while it lasts. But you can then use this document to switch out all the different components. Like here's the Moon Dancer that you start off on. Here's the action economy that they use. Here's how they break down their roles on the ship. Here's the damage that these things do with the different weapons that they have. And here's some of the actions that they want to take in the different roles that they may play. If your character wants to take command of a different role on the ship. And sideline, like Flapjack's like, dude, I got like 7 hit points. If I take any more hits, I'm going to die. And we can't wreck our ship. I need someone to tag in. I'm hurt. So your players take command. And now you're a pilot of the ship. And now Sartell starts to rely on you as a combat veteran. Now you have a reason to be aboard that ship. Elves attack in the Dark Star, the Star Moth ship. As we proceed forward, you get attacked by the Sidetrek with the Rieger. And then we look at there's the Theurgy ambush that we built a map for last week that we're still coloring right now. Got all that stuff in here, and then we go down to Topola's Tower. That's that we put adrift inside of an asteroid belt. Let's get down to that thing. Friend indeed, adrift. We are looking for. The Omama challenge. You've got Topola's Tower at 1. Here's the asteroid belt. We painted this like around, I think, episode 27 or 28, somewhere around there. Check the playlist. But we built out this asteroid field, and we talked about these different points of interest. Like Big Mama finds food or hopes for food at these different points, including Topola's Tower. So if your team wants to get rid of Big Mama, you can bait these different locations and just wait for her to show up in ambush, like Elmer Fudd. Or you can use your ship orrery and actually track her coming into range and set up an ambush before she gets here. After you get done with that, you go to Doom Space. So we had to build out the Doom Space map for you to be able to interact with the environment, and it's obviously still rough. We need to clean it up, but you'll see if you go through my books, you'll see the level of quality that I'm capable of producing. And here's the faction fleet that you get from the Mercanes, the Arcopra, the Artuks. The human faction got replaced with Hadozi. So I need to update this. We have the errata documents. I can update this. But once you have your fleet, then you fly to Zaraxis space, and then you engage the Imperial Citadel. And so we have the Imperial Citadel map. Here it is inside of a 1 mile square with 500 foot squares each. It was like around, I want to say it was around episode 36, 37 that we built the actual map to this. And then here's the underside and all the turret locations on the bottom side of the map, in case your team is clever and decides to take their fleet and fly under the belly of the ship and try to land in the forest so they can go by ground to the temple, so they can hop, they can hop gravity and float up to the top side, and then go Flash Gordon inside the temple with the space elves, and or you can destroy it. If you destroy it, good for you. It's out of the game, and then you win. Here's the giant energy beam, by the way, that it shoots like a giant 3-mile lightning bolt that just deals hundreds of damage to anything that gets caught inside of it. It doesn't succeed a saving throw. So your characters are going to they're going to lose ships on that. This is a real big equalizer for the Zaraxis team. If your characters are really good and start wiping the floor, like just start dusting star moths from the sky. If they get too close to the star moth, they're going to have to start dealing with flitter squadrons and the giant cannon and all the trebuchet towers. They're going to just be raining stones on the characters as they try to get close enough to knock out the citadel, the Temple of Light. But we talk about all of that in here: fleet communication between your characters, the objectives that you could choose to take, the tactics that you can use, the actions that the Citadel will take while you're at the outer fringes of reach, versus if you're actually at the Citadel, the anti-ship defense tactics that they use, how to create a safe space for your characters to be able to land unnoticed while your allies are creating distractions, like all the useful technical bits on how am I going to attack a 1 mile asteroid in space so that I can save the universe from the evil astral elves. We have it all in here. So that alone is probably going to be worth the whatever dollars it's like, probably $15 or something. You're going to get tokens for all the creatures, tokens for all the ships, a 30-page conversion guide for Light of Zaraxis, a random system generator using our scaling system, which is about 10 pages. That leaves about 65 pages of just raw mechanics on how to scale, on how to visualize things at different scales, how to spot a 5-foot guy at the 10,000 miles scale, how to hide your ship inside the shadow of a larger object when somebody's using an orrery to try to sweep scan for where you're hiding, the ship combat we were talking about, sensible rules about like how much plant life do you need to have aboard ship for you to have a sustainable ecology amongst you and plant life so that you don't have to go planet side to refresh your ship. All that stuff, we have it all, and it all uses just these basic physics that are actually inside of the 5e Spelljammer's Adventure in Space book. It's so trite in the 6 pages of mechanics that they provided inside of that box set, that we have to do the work to pull all those mechanics out. And while we could complain that they didn't do it and they left it up to us, I kind of took that to heart, and it was kind of up to us to build it. So I did it. So I built it. So we're now in the process of finishing the edits. We're going to do some page layouts here, so you're going to actually see all this text. And once all the texts are on the pages, that's when we get to start painting all the empty spots on the pages in the Photoshop. And while we're painting, we get to talk about whatever's on that page and just ramble on about this kind of crap while we're building, I don't know, Kendori with like gnomish villages on its back or whatever it is that we get into. But all this stuff, the Spirit Warriors are in there. It's all available. And God, I'm so looking forward to sharing it with you. So if this stuff is interesting to you at all, I'm going to do this for Dragonlance too. And then I'm going to do it for Guilds and Kingdoms. Kind of like Strongholds and Followers, or maybe like the Expert Rulebook from the original Beckme series of Dungeons and Dragons. and use this same concept of scaling mechanics along with a resource system for you to be able to take your squadron of farmers and have them harvest resources that you could then convert to either favors, gold, or additional resources for you to then to be able to scale out from your village to a fief to a kingdom to an empire to a planet-wide society to the Illithid that had command over entire realities and planes at one point. We can scale out that massive distance. So we build Spelljammer first, then we build armies, and then we build kingdoms, and then we build Planescape, and then we build Descent into Avernus. And we take all of this and we convert Descent into Avernus into a spelljamming Planescape campaign where you can literally command El Terrell as your base of operations and make it your city as the focal staging ground for angels to arrive from heaven to form that third faction in the Blood War that Zariel dreams of and that you hope to wake her from her nightmare to return. So it's gonna take a while to do all of this, but we're gonna do it all here on stream. So however long it takes, that's my dream. So I'll be back in 8 hours, and we're gonna paint cemetery. So we'll see you then. I'll talk about that. I'll catch you guys later. Thanks a lot again for being super cool with letting me riff off of your idea, because this was I wanted to do a mecha suit thing, and I never had that second edition document. I had the core rules for the document. I had Rocka Brawl, I had Realm Space, I had Kryn Space, I had Lost Ships, but I didn't have all the spell compendiums. So I literally didn't know about the Spirit War. But when I saw that, it's like, God, that's exactly what I was planning on doing in 13 months from now. So now I can do it in 3 months because it's inside Spelljammer already. There's a precedence there. So now I can just do, In Command of Spirit Warriors and make that a sister piece to this. God, I'm looking forward to that. So I'm done pontificating. I get excited and I ramble. So hopefully you guys think this stuff is cool because I love it. So I'll see you guys on the other side. We're done for the day.